Fatherland videos. Tonight we have a Native American mythology read. Tonight's book read comes from Epic Tales, Native American Myths and Tales. Forward by Sam Gill and Flame Tree Publishing. We're here on page 379. The Waconda Son. Brothers, I am an Atu and a chief. I am a man of courage and truth. I have been a warrior and a hunter of the bear and the wolf ever since the great meeting of the aged councilors, and brave warriors pronounced me a man. I never fled from a foe, and none ever saw me afraid. Who will say that the guard of the red arrows was ever other than a man in his heart? When the Padorcas bound him to the stake, and kindled fires around him, when they thrust sharp, heated stones into his flesh, and tore off his nails with fiery pincers, did they force a cry from him? Did they see his cheek wear the badge of a woman's weakness? No, I am a man, brother. I will tell you a tale why the nation of the Atos had their hunting grounds in the shade of the mountains of the great being. They were led in war to battle, in peace were advised. In peace were advised in the council by a brave and warlike chief, who was called Wasabajinga, or the Little Black Bear. He was the head chief of the nation and its greatest warrior. His martial exploits and daring deeds were the theme of all the tribes who roamed through the vast woods between the Mississippi and the mountains of the setting sun, the Missouri, and the Lake of the Woods. All had heard of his great deeds, and many had seen and felt his prowess. He was stronger than the bear. He was swifter than the deer. He was nimbler than the mountain cat or the panther, who was so expert at stealing horses as Wasabajinga. By his cabin door stood the best in all the land, and they had belonged to the Kansas, the Panis, the Omawa, the Punkas, the Sayaks, and other tribes whose eyes were sharp and arrows long. But neither so sharp nor so long as those of the Ato warrior. He had entered along the camp of the Missouris at the time when the stars are sole torches of night, and had brought thence many scalps. He had crept to the lodge of the Arrowwalk, and taken the heads, Itans, Sox, Foxes, Iowas, and who had such eyes for the trail and the chase as he. He could show you where the snake had crawled through the hazel leaves. He could trace the buck by his nipping of the young buds. He could spring to the top of the tallest pine with the ease of the squirrel, and from thence point of yearling, where lay the hunting lodges and grounds of all tribes of the land. He can endure as much fasting as the land tortoise, or the bear of the frozen north, and march as long as the eagle could fly, never hungry till food was placed before him, never tired when there was more glory to be won, strong, healthy, and nimble. Wasabajinga lived to learn that there was no one in the wilds able to cope with him in battle, and to have his wisdom as loudly applauded as his valor. At home, it was the good fortune of this famous chief to be equally prosperous and happy. He had 9 wives, all beautiful as the past of the master of life, all good and amiable. Though they all lived in the same cabin, ate out of the same bowl, warmed themselves at the same fire, and slept on the same skins. There was a fair sky among them. There never thundered and lightning in the cabin of the Ato warrior. One nursed another's child as kindly as if it were her own. One performed the field task allotted to another, who in return prepared the bison meat for the fire and drew home the fuel from the woods. There was peace and calmness of the summer day in the cabin of Wasabajinko. He lived the happiest of his nation. His children were many. 10 sons were in the father's cabin. Each could bend his father's bow. Each poised his father's spear, and each wielded his father's war club. Daughters had to but one, who grew up to be the most beautiful of all the maidens of the land. She had a skin much whiter than the of the Indian maidens generally. Her teeth were white and even, her hair long, black and glossy, as the feathers of a raven. Her eyes mild as the doves in the season of its matting, and No one ever saw her cross or sulky like other women. Nothing made her angry, though she was beloved by her parents and a great favorite with all the wives of her father. Yet she never claimed exemption from the duties which belonged to the Indian females. Willingly would her little hands have laid hold of the faggot, and her small feet have traveled forth with her mother to the labors of the field of maize. But the fond affection of all around her, and their belief that she was something more than mortal, protected her from a call to share in their labors. She was allowed no part in the cutting up of the bison. She was not permitted to pound the corn, or winnow the wild rice, or bring fire from the woods. It was the pride of the youthful part of the tribe to prepare ornaments for her person. The young maidens, for she was envied by none, wove wampum and made beads from her. The young men passed half their time in hunting the red and blue heron for the gay tuft upon his crown, and the spirit bird for his train of yellow, green, and scarlet, that her hair might be in colors with the beautiful bow that rests upon the mountains after the rains. They made her braces for her wrists and anklets for her legs, of the teeth of the fish with shining scales, and pendants for her ears of the bones of the birds of the night in music. Thus lived Makia, or Starflower, which was the name of the beautiful Ato, till she had reached her 17th summer. It was a little before sunset, upon a pleasant day in the month of green corn, that a young man riding upon a noble white horse was seen entering the great village of the Atos. He appeared to be very strong, but he was tall and straight as a hickory tree. He was clothed as our brothers in cloth, only his garments were scarlet, and our brothers are black. His hair, which was not so dark as of the Indians, was smooth and sleek as the hair of the head of a child, or the feathers of the breast of a hummingbird. His head was encircled with the chaplet made of the feathers of the song sparrow and the red-headed woodpecker. He rode slowly through the village without stopping till he came to the lodge of Wasabajingo. When he alighted, leaving his good horse to feed upon the grass which grew around the cabin, he entered the lodge of the chief, the stone old warriors. He entered the lodge of the chief. The stern old warrior, without rising from his bed of skins, asked him who he was and whence he came. He answered that he was the son of the great Waconda, and had come from the lodge of his father, which lay among the high mountain towards the setting sun. Have you killed any buffaloes on your journey? Demanded Wasabajinka. No, answered the young god. Then you must be very hungry, said the chief. The young man answered that the son of the Waconda had his food from the skies, because the flesh of the animals which lived on the earth was too gross for him. He lived, he said, upon the flesh of the spirit beasts and fishes and birds, roasted in the great fireplace of the lightning, and sent him by the hands of manitos of the air. His drink was the raindrops purified in the clouds. The chief asked him if he had come on a message from the Waconda to the little black bear of the Octos. The young man answered that he had. He said his father had shown him from the high mountains of the west the beautiful daughter of the Octochi, had told him she was good as she was beautiful, and bidding him come and ask her for his wife. His father, he said, bade him to take the bear of the Octos, that though his daughter must now leave her father and mother and nation and accompany his son in the regions of even bright suns and balmy winds, yet in a few seasons more, when the knees of the chief had become feeble, and his eyes dim with the mist of age, and his time had come to die, that he should rejoin his daughter and tend her little ones, and be as joyful as the bird mourning on the banks of the rapid river they glided through the valley of the departed souls. How shall I know that the Waconda son has said this? Asked the chief. I will do these things for a sign, answered the boy god. Tomorrow, when the sun first rises from his slumbers behind the hills of the east, he shall show himself in the cloudless sky, in the space of a breath. Darkness shall cover the face of the heavens. The thunder, which is in the voice of my Father, shall roll awfully, but the lightning, which are the glances of his eye, shall be spared. Before the Indians shall have time to raise themselves from the earth, upon whose cold bosom and cold bosom, in their terror, they will prostrate themselves. The darkness shall be recalled from the earth, and shut up the cave of night. The moment the thunders cease, the lightnings, which are glances of his eye, shall commence their terrific play over the face of the cloudless sky. By these signs ye shall know that I am the Waconda son. If these things shall be done, said the chief, the maiden shall be yours. It was soon told in the village that the Waconda son had come. The Waconda son had come from his father's lodge among the mountains to ask beautiful starflower for his wife. And it was also told that with the rising of the sun on the next morning, he would convince the little black bear, Wasabajinka, that he had not a forked tongue, nor spoke with the lips of a mockingbird. There was little sleep that night in the Octo village. Our nation awaited with great dread and much trembling the coming of the morning. Fearing danger to themselves in the very earth of which they dwell, from the threatened walking of the Waconda's voice, and the glassing of his eye. The nation had assembled beside the cabin of the warrior. When the sun came out from behind the mountains, the young man kept his promise. When the sun first came into view, there was not a cloud on the face of the sky. In the space of a breath, thick darkness overspread the earth, rendering it as dark in the darkest night. And the thunders rose so awfully that the very earth seemed to reel like a man who had drunken twice of the fire eater, which the brother of our friend sell us in the village of the High Rock. But what astonished our people most was that no lightning accompanied the thunder. In a few minutes, the darkness was driven away, the same mighty hand which called for it. The thunder became as mute as sleep of a child which is filled with his mother's milk. And the sun shone out of full clear as before the Waconda had shut his mouth. Then succeeded most terrific lightnings which rent the solid trees and clove asunder the flinty rocks. A moment, and they were too called back. The great being had closed his eyes, and the lightning were imprisoned between their lids. The Indians stood for a moment aghast, and then fell on their faces in worship of the being. And then fell on their faces in worship of the being who could command all things so promptly to do his bidding, and who kept his mouth shut and his eyes closed in mercy to the poor creatures of the earth. When they had recovered from their fright, they rose to an upright posture and pared their obeisance to the stranger, now proved to be the Waconda's son, by signs that no one would dare dispute. He showed his love for them by the kind look he gave them. Turning to the little black bear, he said, "Has the Waconda son proved himself worthy to have the beautiful daughter of the Atto chief to be his wife?" Wasabajinga answered. "The Waconda son has proved himself worthy to have for his wife the daughter of the head chief of the Attos. The chief gives her to him in the presence of all his nation." The chief went into his lodge and brought out his daughter. The son of the Waconda then went up to the beautiful maiden, and finally pressing her in his arms, called her his wife, and told her that, moved by her beauty and goodness, he had left the pleasant skies of his dwelling to come into the cold and misty region where the Octos had their lodges. She wept, but the tears came not from her heart, and smiles beamed through them, as the stars of night shine through the mist, or the sun of spring morning looks through the cloud of vapor. Then the beautiful couple went through the Indian form of marriage. When this was ended, the tribe gathered to feast in the cabin of the chief. Rich and juicy was the bear's meat, set out on the buffalo robe, and white were berries, and sweet was the roasted corn, which the woman brought to feed the guests. They sung and danced, and recounted their warlike exploits in the ears of the listening boy. They told of their hostile visits to the countries of the Padorcas and Bowheads. They mimicked the cry of terror which burst from the lanterns of the painted man of the Octo script with the uplifted hatchet in their camp by midnight, and took 5 scalps as they slept. Then one arose and sung a song of marriage. Brothers, this was the song he sung. Who is that? Oh, it's the master's fair-haired son, come to wed the warrior's beauteous daughter. Tall and manly is his form. Beautiful and fair is she. See his step, how he light. See his eyes, how bright with love and joy. How he glad he looks, so turns his eyes husband's dove. Upon his gentle little wife, he came, caught the maiden in his arms. He pressed her to his bosom as a mother pressed her as an infant. She was pleased and well, but her weird tears of joy hung her head and hid her beauteous face. Yet was she not ashamed. He was the maiden's bashfulness. Blushes she was to be caught in love. See her stolen glances, sunlit glasses, see. She doth not altogether hate the youth. Why dost these weep, mother of the bride? Weepest thou to be part of the daughter? Weep no more. What is life? A reed beat down by every wind that stirs. A flower nipped by the first autumnal blast. A deer that perishes by prick of thorn. Here are morning, gone at evening. Weep not, tender mother of the bride. Soon thou meet her in the happy vows. Beyond the setting sun, ask the lover, he will tell thee so. When the feast was concluded, the songs and dances and sacrifices finished, the Waconda son prepared to take his departure to the mountains where his fathers dwelt. The tribe attended him to the edge of the forest, which had been the hunting grounds of the Octos ever since the rivers ran. And there they left him to pursue his journey with the beautiful and happy wife to abodes of spirits and great warriors and just men. But before the chief parted from his daughter, he made her husband a long speech and prayed that the peace might ever be between them and their people. He told him he had given him his all, his dearly beloved daughter, to whom he must be kind and affectionate. He must not put heavy burdens upon her. He must not send her to cut wood, nor bring home the bison's flesh, nor pound the corn, for her hands had never been harder in tasks like these, nor her shoulders bowed in her father's house to the labors of the field, or forest, or cabin. She had been, he said, the darling of the father's household, and knew not labor, but by name. The Waconda son soon smiled at the words of the old chief, and told him that services like those he had mentioned were never required of women in the Waconda's dwelling. The people of the happy vales and the spirits of the mountain fed not, he said, upon bison's meat, nor pounded corn, and the sun, which was same at all seasons, being so warm that they kept no fires. It was lovely a land, far pleasanter than that which the Athos abode in, nor was it subject to those dreadful storms and tempests which terrified and annoyed those who dwelt upon the banks of the great river. And then, mounting his noble horse and taking his little wife behind him, he again bade them farewell and rode away. He had been gone 2 moons. The third was in his wane, and the parents had become consoled for the loss of their daughter. It was upon a clear and beautiful evening in the moon of harvest, when the forest was losing its robe of green and putting on the ornaments of brown and scarlet, and cool and steady winds were succeeding in the hot, parching breezes of summer. The Athos assembled to dance in the feast of the cabin of their chief. It was one of the most beautiful nights ever beheld. Nothing was heard to break the stillness of the hour, save the rustling of the branches in the cedar and pine, the slight music of the little rivulet, and the mournful singing of the Wacondas perched in the low branches of the willow. The feast was prepared. The master was appropriate, and they were sitting down to partake of the good things of the land and water, when suddenly the earth began to move like the waters of Lake Huron, when agitated by winds from the regions of the frozen star. Upon every side of them, above them, and beneath them, the earth thundered with a rattling sound. In vain did the Athos attempt to leave the cabin. They rowed about like a canoe launched upon a stormy river, or a ball tossed upon frozen water. The rocking of the earth continued throughout the hours of darkness. When the light came, it frightful to behold the disfigured face of the earth. In vain did the authors attempt to leave the cabin. They rowed about like a canoe launch upon a stormy river, or a ball tossed upon the frozen water. The rocking of the earth continued throughout the hours of darkness. When light came, it was frightful to behold the disfigured face of the earth. In some places, lakes were scooped out, and mountains piled up on their banks. Trees were rooted up and broken. Little streams had disappeared. Even large rivers had ceased to be. The tall magnolia lay broken in many places. The larch tree had been snapped like a rotten reed. The flowers of the meadows were scorched and seared. The deer in the thicket lay mangled and bruised. The birds sat timid and shy on the broken buff. The people called their priests together and demanded why these things were. The priest answered, because the master of life was angry, but with whom they know not. Yet soon should they learn, for there was one coming hither who would be able to tell them. 3 suns had passed, and the knowledge of the cause still remained hidden from them. On the morning of the 4th day, when the chief went out of his lodge, he found his beloved daughter weeping by the door of the cabin. Oh, how changed was the beautiful Makia! She was no longer a starflower. The brightness of her eye had departed, as the beauty of the green fields and leafy forests is driven hence by chills of winter. Her cheek was sunken and hollow. Her long black locks lay uncombed upon her shoulders, and the joy and cheerfulness which once warmed her heart and made her foot lighter than the antelopes were no more. She whose feet were fleeter than the deer's now walked feebly and rested off. She whose tongue outchirped the merriest birds of the grove and warbled sweeter music than the song sparrow now spoke in strains as gloom and sad as bidding the cries of the swamps when night is coming on, or the solitary bird of wisdom perched among the leaves of the oak. The father sat by her and asked her when she came. From the valley upon the side of the mountains, she answered. Where's your husband? Demanded Wasabajinga. Dead, answered the starflower, and wept afresh. Wow! Exclaimed the warrior, and hid his face with his hands. When he had sat thus a while, he inquired the manner of his death. She told him that before they reached the mountains of the Waconda, they saw a pale man coming towards them, mounted on a low black horse. When he came up to them, he asked her husband if he would buy blankets and beds and the fire eater. That the Waconda son answered, no, and told him that it was very, very bad in him to carry the fire eater to destroy the poor, misguided Indians. The man upon the black horse answered, that he was a better man than the Waconda son, for he was no earthen but lived where men worship a greater than the Waconda than his father in a beautiful house built by with his hands, and not beneath the shade of the cypress and the oak. Upon this, her husband did but smile when the pale man elevated the spear he carried in his hand, and with the bolt which issued from it, struck him to the earth, from which he never rose again. Then there came a cry of mourning from the cabin of the little black bear. The women rushed out and tore their hair and cut their flesh with sharp stones through their grief for death of the husband of their beloved starflower. And they sung melancholy lament for the youth who had perished in the morning of life, while the dawn was yet upon his cheek, and his heart had never felt the shaft of sorrow. They sung how happy there was yet upon his cheek. And the lovers were eerie, and malice and cruelty of the white men destroyed their joys. Eerie, their sacrilegious hands had laid one in the low dust and left the other in pine under the bereavement, till death would be your blessing. They painted the anger and grief of the great Waconda when he found he would be a blessing. And they painted on the Waconda for the darling of his house numbered with the slain. They sung that, exasperated with the children of the earth for murder of his beloved son. He caught upon his earthquakes to deface and lay waste of their country. They bade the eye know how well these ministers, who his wrath had performed his dread commands. So they sung, for many a weary day's journey upon the banks of the mighty river, for many a long encamping in the direction of the setting sun, the land lies in ruins. They both is broken, and the silent trunk is rent. The flower lies bleeding, and the voice of the dove is hushed. But see, he is hitting the marks of havoc. He effaced from the country of the Octos, because it is the native land of the beautiful woman who had become the wife of his son. Long was the mourning continued in deep grief, for many a moon pervaded for the cabins and the camps of the Octos. The great Waconda did not permit the starflower to remain long upon the earth, but soon called her away to be reunited to his beloved son in the land of spirits. Yet she often returns to look upon the place of her birth, to breathe of the things she loved, and to sit beneath the shade of the trees she planted. In the seasons of flowers, she is often seen by the moonlight, bending together the choicest which grew on the prairie. And her choice is often heard in the sighs of the breeze in spring. The Waconda sun never comes with her, for he fears the treachery of the violence of the pale faces. I hope y'all enjoyed tonight's book read. They say when you see movies and cartoons and videos and stuff like that, they might entertain you. You might be interested in them. But the wise ones always say, you should read the book about it. You enjoy it even more. So, when it comes to Black Panther of the land of Waconda, this is the origin of it. And I hope y'all enjoy this book read of Waconda, or Black Panther, the real Waconda.